at this. And both of them actually are international. Suzanne came to Lee as an international student. And our lovely Anna came as an international faculty member. She is. She knows I think she's beautiful inside and out. Most lovely. So I invited them to talk to you about some of the ways that they support students from diverse backgrounds outside the classroom, not necessarily related through curriculum, but outside the classroom. And which one of you is going first?
Well, we thought we'd just tell them about ourselves.
Okay.
And we'd start with that,
Yes.
and then we move on.
Okay, perfect.
So I'm Suzanne, and you can tell from my accent, I'm no Dixie chick. I was born and raised in Trinidad. And my ethnic background is East Indian. My ancestors came from India. I've never been to India. But I was raised in a Caribbean culture, in an East Indian home. My father is a converted Muslim, my mother a converted Hindu, but I was born and raised in a Christian home. My dad's a Church of God pastor in Trinidad. I was born and raised in a Christian home, but I have relatives on both sides who are either Hindus or Muslim. As Pentecostal as he is, he sent us to a Presbyterian school, a Hindu school, and our high school was a Catholic girls' convent. Yes, I'm a confused child. I came here to Lee. I worked here for many years. I got married later on in life, and when I got married, I went all the way to the Middle East and lived there for 5.5 years with my husband David. 3 of those years were spent in Egypt, in a Muslim culture, and then 2.5 of those years were spent in Israel, in a primarily, although we interacted with both Palestinians and Israelis, we were on the Israeli side, so I had a huge interaction for 2.5 years with Jews. I returned 5.5 years ago, and so I'm back here.
Well, I am from Brazil. I was born and raised in Brazil, lived there all my life. When I got to this country, I was already 27 years old, so I'm very Brazilian. I've been here for 10 years. I'm from, on the one hand, I like to think of myself as a world traveler. I've lived in Ireland, I've lived in Spain, I lived in Argentina for a little bit, and I've traveled other places, but also from the deep countryside of Brazil. I'm from the Brazilian Cleveland. It's like small and very agricultural. We have corn, tomatoes, cow. We have the cowboy thing and all of that. We had farm grown up, so I go in a little bit of both worlds. I was born and raised. My family was Catholic tradition, but it was very more ritualistic and traditional than really spiritual. So I was not really saved until I was out of college. But thanks be to God. Here I am today. God is good in His great mercy. He called me to be His, and here I am, and it's been the most fantastic journey ever. I also get married very late in life, like last year. Year before actually, and about my cultural background. I think that that's my house. So in Brazil, the way I saw myself in Brazil is very different the way American society is started to shape how I see myself. So in Brazil, I was not ever a minority, right? So in Brazil, I was upper middle class. You don't think of yourself as a minority group or anything like that, and it's very different. I was not Latin American until I moved to the States. In Brazil, we were just Brazilian. We don't talk about ourselves as Latin Americans at all. I mean, there is this part of the rest of the subcontinent, which is Latin America, but not us, really. Not really, because we're not Hispanic, right? So Brazil was a colony of Portugal, so we're not Hispanic, we don't speak Spanish, so they're the Latin Americans. and then there's us. We're just Brazilian. That was only until I moved here when everyone started calling me Latin American. And sometimes Hispanic. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna argue that, but not really. And so it's very interesting because after I came here, that's where people start to tag me and label me as Latin American, which encompasses more than just being Brazilian, and as a minority, Latina and brown or whatever. So, which is very interesting, and I think helped me see how some of our student population feel about those labels. So I think that both of us are talking today coming from that background.
One more thing I want to say that I didn't say. Trinidad is 40 miles by 60 miles. 1.5 million people live on that island. 40% are of East Indian descent, like my background. 40% are of Afro-Trinidad descent. And we have a solid mixed population, Chinese, you go to school with everybody. My friends in that Catholic school were Shirin Abdul, Chandra Maharaj. These were my friends in that school. And as I like to tell people, where the street my parents live on, they've lived in that house for 40-something years. We have the Singhs, who are Hindus on this side. We have the moderator of the Presbyterian Church, who is our next door neighbor on that side. And we have a Muslim senator who lives on that side. You do not move when people who are not like you move into your neighborhood in Trinidad. If that were the case, we would be living in the sea. Because we would be moving, and I need to say that.
Yeah, so part of our talk today is about how we can log and affirm and support and integrate those student populations that are minorities, especially in the current political and social climate. There has been lots of things going on that really affect our students, that I can say affect me personally. So we've had several instances across the country on issues on racism and the canceling of DACA. There's the issue of refugees and Muslim populations, and it affects our students. It affects me. And so it's just to start with an anecdote, right? So why those things matter, why are we here doing this, and why do I really think it matters? I remember the evening before, there was the evening of election night, and I was coming from Christian Tennessee Preparatory School because I was giving a talk on faith and politics, and driving from there to my home, I leave off of Candace Lane out of 25th, and I passed in front of the Cleveland banner, and they had a protest, which was Make America White Again. And I'm thinking, what the what? You're kidding me, right? So this is happening in my town, in this town where it's a Christian town, and we have Lee University, which is a Christian school, and this is the buckle of the Bible Belt, and this is happening under our watch. You gotta be kidding me. And it's very, it was very sad to see that. But on the other hand, it was also very encouraging to see some of our faculty and a good number of our students counter-protesting and engaging that, and I felt no, there is a group of people here who love us. There is a group of people here who will support us and who will stand by us, and that for me was very meaningful, right? So when the KKK went to protest in Tennessee, and our faculty and our students went to counter-protest, for me that was very affirming. What I personally felt is there are people here who really care, and they don't love me just with their words, they love me with their actions, right? So love cannot just be love if you just say it. You've got to do it. And for me personally, that was also very meaningful, and I imagine what it is for our students as well. I always like to think of myself of this strong, independent woman, which I am, and yet even for me, those things are not easy, right? So there was this one time I was driving from, I was going home, it was about half a mile from my home, and I was coming from working out at Lee, so I was a freaking hot mess in my team outfit, my hair's all over the place, I'm sweaty, I don't look like a faculty at all. And the police stopped me on my way home, and it was terrifying because the very first words out of the officer's mouth were, "Where did you learn to speak English? What are you doing in Cleveland, and how long have you been here?" And I was not prepared for that. I was prepared for license and registration, semi-prepared for license and registration. I had not ever been stopped ever. I've been here for 10 years in this country, for 5 years in Cleveland. And it was like, but did I learn to speak English? And what am I doing in Cleveland? And how long have I been here? And I always think of myself, I'm this strong, independent woman. And suddenly, there's this officer that works in our town for our protection that's very intimidating. And I had this moment of like semi-panic. I'm like, I don't know how to respond to that. Like, this is awful. And he was very intimidating through it all. Like, I could bring you to the precinct and I could have you arrested and I could give you this type of fine or this other type of fine because you're technically out of town and into county, but I can make your, and I was like, why is this happening to me? Like, I don't understand. And I know at some point that I'm a faculty at the university, and I said I'm a member of this community. I attend Living Word Church. I'm a well-respected member here, and only after he knew that I was a faculty at Lee, he started to calm down and be less intimidated and aggressive. But I'm thinking, I'm a grown-up woman, and it was terrifying. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, imagine what happened to our students that got stopped, like, all the time. And, sometimes they might have a support group. Like, I have a great support group. I'm, like, integrated in my church. I'm part of my small group. I know people here at Lee that I know I can talk to, just like to debrief and to process things, because like I don't understand why this is happening. But I imagine like those young people come, some of them are local, some of them are not local, some of them are international, and in the reality of Lee, some of them are part of local churches, which I encourage them to do, and some of them are not. Right? Some of them, sometimes they have this illusion that chapel, even though despite all of its benefits, is church, but chapel is great, but not church. You need to be part of a local community, but some of them are just not. And I'm thinking, like, who do those young people go to when they need to process those things, and who is there for them and to affirm and support and say, hey, I'm with you. It's okay. It's going to be okay. You are wanted here. We want you. We need you. We love you. Right? And so that's why I think both Suzanne and I have been involved in trying to offer that support and with actions demonstrate that we're there for them.
Before we go into tangible examples, we to affirm students, I just wanted to mention briefly about this emerging body of literature about the development of a sense of belonging among students. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. You can Google it. Google on find out about this. But many scholars have argued that developing a sense of belonging is necessary, yet challenging. Common to the literature is an emphasis on psychological feelings of fitting in, acceptance, and support from a group or community. Some of the literature describes a sense of belonging as being fostered specifically through campus activities, and we know that that's a big part of what my case does. One particular book that I recently came across addresses the link between feelings of acceptance and the success of minority students. Pretty powerful. Feelings of acceptance and success, their success. Bottom line, students pick up signals from their schools, from our school, from their peers, from their faculty. Whether or not they belong, Students pick up signals from their schools and peers about whether or not they belong, perceptions that can affect their success both inside and outside the classroom. Failure to have this belongingness, I feel, and not feel, but I see it. If it's not there, it leads to social isolation, it leads to alienation, and it leads to loneliness. When Anna and I came together and we talked about this, just because we're talking to faculty and we want to get it a little bit organized, we thought we would put it in a template of the public sphere and the private sphere. Public discourse and private discourse. How do we handle this publicly and privately? And she's going to talk some about the public setting, and I'm going to hone in on the private setting.
Yes, I wish I had something brilliant to say, but I have not, which is how I feel all the time. But I think, like, in terms of the public setting, one of the things that I've been involved and I've noticed encourage those students is the number of events that we do, whether they are city events or cultural diversity committee events. Just this last year, we had a 5-part series on refugees. We had the candlelight vigil following the KKK demonstrations in Charlottesville. We've had we have a troops table where 3 prominent evangelical African-American women came to share about being women and being black and being evangelical and how do you deal with that in the current culture. We had events we do International Women's Week where we have special speakers. We've had discussions with Franco Crosby and Micah Smith, who are some of our students, who are minority students, sharing their experience, like how they felt and some things that happened to them while they're here, how they deal with that. We've had a number of meetings. Black Girl Magic.
Black Girl Magic. I love that one.
Yes, that was really powerful. We've had 2 DACA events, and part of what happens in those events is that we have sometimes faculty that are talking about the issues and helping both the students understand the issues, like just framing it, explaining it, not just students, but students, other faculty. But also we usually have a time, like most of the time we always have a time for students to talk about their own experiences, right? So it's not just faculty speaking, the students are not just receivers, they are an integral part of those talks where they can share, that's how I came to the States, that's how my parents brought me over the border, that's how I feel about this. This is the struggles that I have had, or this is how people treated me, or the officers, the police treated me since I've been here, and so on and so on. And you get to hear from them. And I believe this to be extremely important and powerful for various reasons. First, number one is that just like we being present there shows to them that we care, that we're not just, I think it, so in Hebrews, the Word of God says that Jesus is our perfect high priest because he came as a man, he suffered all things, he was tempted in all things, and because he went through what we go, he can intercede for us perfectly, right? So that's how you have such a precious high priest. And part, when I think about that, I think of empathy, right? So he gets it because he's been through it. Like, he hears, like, he can listen to our prayers because he's been through it. Like, he's not just someone who understands things intellectually. And I think for us, I mean, we're all very smart people, we got our PhDs, and it's, sure, we can understand those things intellectually. We can read about them, sure. But it's a different thing when you actually get and you sit across the person and you hear to them, to their particular experiences, what they have to say, how they feel about it. And I think that gives us an added level of empathy to relate to them, to speak to them, to pray for them. I mean, you know, I don't need to tell you this, like, you know that you have much more fervent prayers when you were praying for someone who's going through something that you've been through than for something that you absolutely cannot relate. And we're not going to go through everything, thanks be to God. We're not going to go through everything, thank you Jesus, but for the things that we don't necessarily go through, we can still grow in empathy by listening and knowing, and I think that matters a lot. Another thing that matters a lot is just like seeing you there matters a lot. Like they know as a matter of fact that you care. It's not just you get to your classroom and you go teach your normal courses and you say, hey, by the way, I really care about you. You were demonstrating. Like that's evidence that you really care about them and the issues that matter to them, even if you have never been through it. Even if you have never been through it, even if you've never been a minority person or part of a minority group, even if you've never been discriminated, but you know it's not okay and you care enough to be there and to show them that you care, and that matters a lot, right? So let your love be open. Let your love be out there. Don't let your love be a hidden love. Let your love be an open love. So it affirms them a lot, and I've experienced that just being to some of those events and later interacting with some of those students that are in my classes that were also at the events, and how much support and really acceptance. Like they feel like, yeah, someone here, like they love me for who I am. They take me as I am. Like I don't need to conform and be exactly as everyone else. Like there's someone here that cares for what I'm going through and tries to understand it. And that matters a lot, and that has an impact even in their scholarship, in their studies, right? And I have this student, she's a DACA student, she's precious, and she failed my first exam badly, badly. And part of that was she was just going through like a moment of panic and crisis because her DACA status, she could not renew it because she didn't fall within the renewal deadline. And she literally doesn't know what's going to happen to her in a few months. But we had the DACA events, and she come, and I was there, other faculty were there, and after that she's like, okay, you really care. And that opened that door for she to come to my office and for us to sit and say, okay, I really do, so let's sit together, and even though we don't know what the days will look like for you, but let's come up with a plan so that you can do your best like right now. And her success in terms of in the following exams was a dramatic change, like dramatic. Like her level of motivation. I can do this. I'm gonna continue to do this. I don't know what tomorrow's gonna look like, but today I'm gonna do my best. Just like now she's looking into doing an internship in DC. So I mean, it's a dramatic change from a student like freaking out that can barely come to class to, okay, we can do this. Like there is people here love me and care about me. They are here with me. They're gonna hold my hand. We can do this. It matters a lot. I mean, I've seen various of those anecdotes with my students. I believe Suzanne as well. So in the public sphere, I think that's it. Come to a few, show up, especially invite your non-minority students as well. It's staggering for me to see that when I was trying to announce and explain the DACA events and other events in my classrooms, my white students looked at me like as if I'm talking about something that comes from another world. Like, what is that? I never heard about this. And then of course it becomes a teaching moment. But lots of times it's really out of their radar. It really is. I've had students ask me in the classroom, because when I teach American government, you go over court cases, so you go over court cases and racial issues, and really they ask me, but is there still discrimination in the States? I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Okay, let's talk about that. But for real, like that was a real, like this person was not, it was an honest to God question, because they thought that after Brown v. Board of Education and you have desegregation and suddenly everything was magical, and it's like, it's not. Things are still kind of segregated. Well, look at neighborhoods. Like it's not like that in Trinidad, it's not like that in Brazil. You don't separate by here's just your black communities, and it's also because we intermarry a lot. But so we have like all sorts of skin colors in the spectrum. Not quite like here's trying to change here a little bit, but yeah, they're not very aware of things, and I think it helps a lot to encourage them to come and participate, and also from the student point of view, that the students would also grow in empathy of what happens with other sects of students that they might not naturally interact with. So helping to promote that student-to-student interaction, I think is another really helpful, powerful thing that we can do to be facilitators of that.
I have been here, I think this is 33 years. You know, I don't look it right. I came here as a student, so I've been here for a while. And as I was getting my thoughts together for this, interestingly, this comes in waves, and you have you have a new group of students. So this has never stopped for me. Some of the same conversations I had 25 years ago, I had it last week, because new students keep coming, so I hope I'm getting better at it, and I have richer examples, and I'm a little more comfortable, but no, it's a journey, and it continues, and it continues with new students. I am much more comfortable, and I'm speaking from a very personal space, with the private setting. I feel that I have more effect on students in that setting. It's a strength, I don't know, but throughout the years, that's where I flow. And so what I'm going to share with you here from the private setting, some examples of things that I have done, and I hope you can glean some nuggets from it. The word hospitality is key to this. However you interpret hospitality. Doesn't always mean a meal. Extending hospitality with an open door. Extending hospitality when you walk on the sidewalk. The word hospitality is a key part of how we approach this, from my perspective. I also want to say that some of the kids who need our help the most are the introverts, and you will not hear their story. You have no idea. It's very easy for a kid to come in and just tell you all the bad things, so and so, and that's good, and you have that, and I get it, and I move. But so many of our students are very quiet and they're holding this. Something happened terribly to them, and I don't have a Band-Aid or an answer how to. Part of it is intuition, part of it is discernment, part of it is being hospitable. Because in a hospitable mode, these students tend to respond, tend to come to you. So be cognizant sometimes that when some of these quiet ones with some of the most powerful stories come to you, they don't start right away. They beat around the bush. And then they might come to your door 2-3 times, and on the third occasion, then you get the real reason. So be patient. Be patient. Do not be annoyed. They're not irritating you. There is some reason why they're coming to you. Consider it a privilege that they chose you to share their burden with. And be cognizant of that. They wouldn't tell you the first time. Next, I'm not good at this, but I would like to encourage you to set goals. And let me explain what I mean by a goal. You all have advisees, you all have students who come to you. One a month. One student of color a month. Try and be intentional, just one. Let's say we don't do any in December and we don't do any in the summertime. That's 8 per year. Can you imagine 250 faculty multiply that by 8? how many solid conversations per year we can have? 1 per month. Whatever, hey, said be prayerful, be thoughtful, but it has to be intentional. I don't think it happens by osmosis. We have to be intentional about reaching out to some of these students. Lobby with your departments and committees that you serve on, if whatever department you're in, to intentionally place international students, students of color, students with disability, to be a voice. There are times when you call a committee and you have students, just be intentional about it. It's rich. I listened to Ed Lee's final comments. There's so much richness. Not because I come from Trinidad, I'm tired of talking of the beach and all that, but there's so much stories and wealth of information to share, and it's fascinating and interesting as you put these students on your committees and give a fresh perspective of how to approach a subject matter. Whatever you're doing, just be cognizant of that. Use your capital and clout to connect students to work-study jobs. That's one of the best things. I went to Trinidad for Christmas. I was gone for about 10 days, and I came back, and of course I had a full mailbox. 80% of my mail, listen to this, 80% of my mail were Christmas cards from student workers who worked for me going way back to 1998. It was not my intention to have this kind of relation, but it happens. There is, all of you have student workers in your office, and it's a powerful kind of mentoring that goes on, and a powerful connection. So use your clout. If you know, to see if you could rein a student in and get them in. Somebody says, I need a student worker. Connect that student. A lot of these students don't have cars, so they can't drive. Working in McDonald's, it is essential that they find jobs on our campus. Not everybody's comfortable with it. I'm okay with it. Invite them home. And I want to say it's not expensive. I think I cook good, but I don't always have to cook. You could buy some Stouffer's lasagna, bake it and put it in your pretty dish, and they would love it. They would think you made that from scratch. I put it in a pretty dish. Sometimes I cook from scratch, but invite, have groups over. One of the things I've learned too, and this is just a little tip, I've done it both ways. I would invite just a whole group of international students. I've started mixing it. Because it could turn into a gripe session and all the things that are bad and going wrong on the campus and in America. So I strategically bring in white Caucasian students who have a love for international students, and I kind of divide it, and we get that going, and we have some nice dialogue. It's interesting. I spend more work on what I'm going to talk about than what I'm going to cook at these dinners, because I think that is where the learning and it, I do all these little questions and I put it in a box and they pull it out and we get to hear them talking. But practice hospitality too by inviting students to your home. When going back to these office visits, it's not all fluff. Raise discussions on how to successfully self-advocate. By that I mean, I am not going to advocate for you all the time. We teach our freshman students in Gateway all the ropes, how to start here. If you don't get here, you go here. If you don't, it's the same thing. You don't always have to feel the burden to be teach self-advocacy. In fact, I was reading a paper on students with disabilities and self-advocacy, and they talked about, those students said that their self-advocacy was rooted in self-awareness. So teach, that's something to teach too. So much of the discourse that we talk about sometimes, if we're not careful, is about what we lack. And I like what Edley says, there's a lot of richness. Sometimes move the conversation to all that's great, all that's positive, and move it along with you than staying in that realm of negativity. One of the things I think you heard me say in the faculty meeting yesterday, we dine with your department. Hey, take that back. Okay, you're going to be hearing from me, but run with that. That's another thing. Here's where you can get with your students. Teach students how to move on. Now, this is a tricky one for me, and I want to be cautious here. Let me explain what I mean by that. Teach students how to move on. I've had students come to the office with some very, very painful stories. And sometimes it takes a while. I'm not a psychologist. Sometimes it calls for them visiting the counseling center. I send them to other people sometimes. But after a while, you talk about it, you pray, and they talk about it. Help them move on. If after 5 years, no, and I want to be careful here because some stories are powerful and could be used to carry on the message, but sometimes I think every time we get with them and we regurgitate that, you need to ask yourself, is that helping them? Is that helping? And I want to be careful because I know sometimes perpetuating the story, there's power in it too. Mm-hmm. But there has to be a balance. Am I making sense? Yeah. Okay. We also need to consider some of our students, our key student leaders. We spend a lot of time with some of the things that Anna talked about. But I think we need to also get with some of our student leaders and talk with them about get them on a track for rules of engagement training, for lack of a better term. They are some of our leaders, movers and shakers, and while we're working with just students here, we've got some strong students here who can make a dent. They know the ins and outs of this campus, and they can probably make things happen faster than us here. And I often wonder if that's a missing thing here. I'm going to wrap up just a minute, a couple more. There is some caution too that I want to mention here. I put down here, spread the love around. And let me explain what I mean about that. I began by saying it comes in waves. Every 4 years you have a crop of students. And as faculty, we're humans, we gravitate towards the charming ones and the ones who are extroverted and make us laugh and easy to talk to. But we got to spread the love around to some of the shy ones, and don't put all our energy into this one person or this one group. We've got a lot of other students there too. It's very easy to have what I like to say, poster children. It's very easy to get to that point, and we neglect some of God's other children too. Creating a sense of belonging is not only about advocacy. It's also about correction. And it's also about looking for teachable moments. I have been known to, one student came in and it sounded good, it sounded like pure discrimination, but I had a hunch something was just not right. And I picked up the telephone and I called the office. that this student was referencing, and I got a totally different story. 360-degree story. When the student came back, I said, look, here's what I heard, and the student bent ahead, and well, yeah, and this was on the eve of me taking the student on a study abroad trip. And it was an office that had helped us to get our trip ready and help that student. I said, look, we gotta make this right here. We're getting on a plane, and we're a family. We're a family. I hear you. I hear that you feel hurt, but we're a family here. I need for you to go make this right. And the student went and apologized to this office staff member, and I didn't want to know the detail. We went on our trip. We never spoke about it. About 8 years later, she came back on campus, and she said, that was such a powerful learning experience for me. Now, I have to tell you this, it could have gone south. It could have gone south, and she could have said, I'm not going. Thank the Lord it did not. But my point is, in advocacy, there's a part of advocacy where we can find teachable moments, and we can do correction too. And let's not be one more story. Just in December, we had a student who wrote very, very, in my opinion, was rude. It was disrespectful. It was very, very awful to this office, and I got copied on it. I had no business being copied on it, but I got copied because I think the student saw me as an advocate. But I disagreed with it, and I kept looking at this. This is not right. This is not right. You don't. In that email, a faculty member was copied. I happen to know this faculty member, very quiet, and I thought, he's going to just leave this alone, and Well, I came to the cafeteria, and lo and behold, I saw the faculty, and we kind of ran into each other, and he said, you got the email? And I said, yeah. And I said, oh, I'm really torn about it. I said, don't worry, I'll talk to her about it. And I said, yeah, no. I mean, we're friends, we have a relationship. And I thought, we need more of that. We need more of that. We have a relationship. I just need to help her understand that was not the way to go about this. So that's something I want to add in the midst of all caution. And last, be careful not to paint students with a broad stroke. All African American students, all Asian students, all with a broad stroke. They're all different. They're all different. One of my, and they all, this whole DACA thing, I was telling Anna when we were talking, I was stunned. Yeah, and I just happened to catch it. And not stunned, I shouldn't say stunned. I knew it would happen, but I didn't. I was in a conversation with another student of color, an international student, who let me know very nicely that she was not in favor of the whole DACA thing, because she had a perspective from her country and how they dealt with immigrants. Well, it was, if she didn't speak, I would not have known that. So all of these students have different stories. They're coming from different perspectives. They have different positions on things. Be careful not with the broad stroke. Okay, I think I'm ending my notes.
Okay, I'm going to say something.
Good.
Yeah. We had some really good things that happened last semester. I'll probably cry, but anyway, you're used to that. The DACA thing was just kind of huge. I had gone to a workshop during the summer, and I came back with some ideas, and I had asked Phil Cook if I could send a letter to his office if they would send it to the DACA students, because that was one way it was recommended to get in touch with them. And he said, we don't keep track of who they are, so we don't have a list. So I didn't do anything further, and then about halfway through the semester, a student emailed me and said, I want to talk to you about something, could we get together? And it wasn't one of my students, I didn't actually know her. So I met with her, and she wanted to organize this event, just in information session about DACA. And she wasn't a DACA, but she was she's a young woman who is in that community. She was born in the U.S., but she grew up in Guatemala, and then she came back, and her brother was illegal, and she wasn't, and so it'd be complicated. So she was very sympathetic, and she just thought, people need to know more about this. So I helped her organize this event, and in the course of doing that, I met these young women who are DACA recipients. So we're planning this event, and they came to my house, and we had a dinner, and they're sitting around the table planning this event. And it's in this context that they decide they're going to tell their stories. And honestly, so they started sharing their stories, and they said, we have literally never said this before, because they're so afraid of the condemnation, and they're so afraid of outing their parents and putting them in jeopardy. And so they're sort of stumblingly working their way through these stories about their life and how they came here and how they live now. And in the process of saying it in that sort of safe place, they decided that they would be willing to tell their stories if we thought it would help people understand their plight a little bit better. And so I said, I would never ask you to do this, but if you're willing to, I know it'll make a difference. I know it'll be huge. And so we organized this event, and two really good things came out of it. One, Anna was one of the speakers, and she just talked about the law. Here's how it's organized, and here's what it means. And then the girls told their stories. And immediately after they were finished, people came rushing forward and just hugged them. And so they had no idea. I mean, they really didn't know what the result would be. They didn't know if they would be stoned. They didn't know if people would be in 911 calling the police for returning their parents. They really didn't know. And so when this happened, and people just came forward and literally embraced them, people they didn't even know, came forward and literally embraced them, it changed them so greatly. I can't even tell you. They had so much more confidence in this place, and so much more a sense of, I had this dark secret and I told it, and it turns out it wasn't dark after all. And so they just felt so much more, so much lighter and so much more open. So two things came out of that. Anna was invited to go to a workshop for our financial aid people to explain how our students can work. They do have permission to work, and how that works, and what's that within the framework of DACA, and if there's no more DACA, how does that work? So in financial aid, she was able to give them information that will make them better servants of our students when they come in. If they're willing to say that they're DACA, they'll know more how to handle them. Also, on that very night, Mrs. Freak, who's in charge of student on-campus employment, said, I'm going to save jobs for them. They need jobs on campus, I'm going to save jobs for them. So, immediately the campus culture started to change immediately because they were willing to tell their stories. Then Chattanooga State wanted to have a similar event, and so somebody told them that we had done this event at Lee, and so they contacted me, and they said, what was the most powerful thing that we did? And I said, well, by far the most powerful thing was the students telling their stories. And so she tried to get students at Chattanooga State to tell their story, and they wouldn't. And I think it's that whole thing, that's not a community, it's a commuter school, and it's just a whole different environment, and they just wouldn't do it. So she asked if our students would do it. So I asked them if they would, and they said, we would love to. Now they've done this, they know how to tell their story, and they see that it matters. So, and what I thought was beautiful about this, they and all of Latinos as a group went to Chat State. They had this whole entourage that went with them to give them support. So they told their stories at Chattanooga State as well. And then we had another event that was part of chapel, the speaker, and we had an event following that where we sent 175 letters to Congress supporting DACA. And again, because they told their stories in that setting also. So, but what was most amazing to me about this was how it just turned around, how they felt about themselves and how they felt about themselves as members of this community. They really felt like they were accepted. And there were people not only, as she said, not only saying they support them, but actually going on the line and writing letters to send to Congress. So one other thing I'll say in the next 20 seconds. We had a candlelight vigil after the Charlottesville thing. It was a really beautiful event from my perspective. And we had a student who's dual enrolling here who is from Walker Valley. He's the president of student government at Walker Valley. And so Walker Valley is 96%, 94% white, with 3% African American and 3% Hispanic. And they're starting to have pushback. They're starting to have some real racial tension in that school. And that little teeny minority of students of color really feel overwhelmed. So he because he was at the candlelight vigil, he invited us to bring students to Walker Valley to talk about first steps they might take to try to start resolving these issues. So one of the DACA girls and two of the students from the candlelight vigil went with me to Walker Valley, and we're going to be working with them this next semester, because for them to hear a story of a student like them that's just a little bit older but kind of in their same age group, they loved that. And really, they sent out invitations to specific students to come to this meeting, but they didn't have anyone to make them come, so they weren't sure if anybody would come. They didn't know how sure they were in trying to address this. It was people of color and not. The room was so completely full that they had to start bringing in chairs. So it was a real encouragement to the students at Walker Valley that there is an audience for this kind of conversation. There's a place to start. So I think that's two good outcomes from some of the stuff we tried to do this semester. And we're out of time. So you guys don't get to talk at all.
No questions. Any questions?
They had a meal for international students for Christmas as people were leaving, and of course that was outside of the time frame that most faculty were gone and whatever. And so being the hospitality person that I like to be, I contacted the office and said, hey, how do you do that? I mean, do you need people to help with this? What's the story? So I'm wondering if there could be more communication about those kind of events, recruiting people to bring stuff or whatever. When I talked to Golden, he said there was a couple people from a couple offices, and I mean, it was just kind of, it wasn't like it was a global thing that people realized that they were welcome to bring something to. Or whatever. So I said, well, do I just drop it off, or do I come, or what, you know? So I thought I was just dropping it off, but I was, of course, invited to stay, and it was a very good event. I think the majority of the students
were there.
There was actually some family members too who were in visiting because of graduation, but I bet there were 30 or 40 students, 30 at least. So it was I thought it was a good crowd. The student I was particularly looking for had been in one of my classes, and so I thought she would, anyway, ultimately she came as well. So anyway, that was really a neat thing, and so I sat with some of the family members and students, and it was nice to talk with them and have them, tell, why they're here, and if someone was graduating or what have you.
Quick comment. I know I don't have time to elaborate, but I appreciate the efforts to educate us. I've put forth some intentional efforts one-on-one with students, and it's been phenomenal just seeing the difference where if you plant the seed, you get a little bit of attention, where that will go.
Yes.
I can elaborate, but we don't have time.
That's right. Intentionality.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry I did all the talking. Now you have to go. You can have free food on the way out.